Welcome to the Sellernomics podcast, sharing valuable tips and information in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Each week, we deliver the best interviews with some of the top Amazon personalities in the industry to help you grow your business. Today's episode is brought to you by GETIDA, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. And now, here is your host, Rob Stanley.
Hey everyone, Rob Stanley here again with another great episode of Sellernomics. You know, we've talked about this before, and it is something that comes up a lot, and that is financing strategies for Amazon sellers. Have a great guest here today, Gareth Everard of Gallup Growth, and I'm going to bring him in the studio. And just to give everybody a heads up, we're going to be talking about grow your Amazon business with smart financing strategies with Gareth. Gareth, welcome to the studio. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, let's jump right into this. So I think this is a really important topic. Amazon sellers are always looking to grow their business. They're always looking for like finance strategies, ways that they could grow. And there's a lot out there, right? And sometimes there's even some like drawbacks depending if they look at the wrong financial options. So what drawbacks are there in the current Amazon financing options out there right now?
It's such a great question. So, I mean, as someone who plays in both the Amazon, Shopify, all that, the entire e-commerce space, what you often have seen in the last, I'd say like 4 or 5 years, during this sort of like e-commerce boom times, especially, has been the rise of what is classified as a merchant cash advance company. So I'm not going to name specific names, but there are lots of companies that are probably hitting everyone listening to this inbox constantly saying, hey, we want to offer you capital, coming in. And then when you go through their funnel and anything like that, you're going to end up finding these cash advance type situations where they're like, we're going to provide you money. It's not a loan, and you're going to repay it as a % of revenue. And here's how it all works. And often the way that those get expressed is saying, all right, we're going to advance you $200,000, and you're going to pay that back on this % of your revenue over time. And we're going to end up targeting a 6-month payback period. You'll be fully caught up within 6 months. And then when they've loaned you $200,000, they'll tack on, let's say, another $20,000. So you're paying back $220,000. Well, the thing is, when you're paying back, then if they're looking at your revenue rate and they're saying, great, we've tacked on this $20,000 on top of 10%. So in your mind, you might be tempted to think, oh, okay, it's like a 10% loan. That's a pretty good cost of capital in the grand scheme of things. For people who are like kind of aware of interest rates. At the end of the day, though, the thing is, if you're succeeding, if you're doing exactly the point of this capital, which is growing it, 6 months, obviously, if you're paying it back in 6 months, it's not 10%, that's 20%. But if you're growing your business, you're now at risk. If you pay it back in 4 months, which is good for you as the brand, like, look, hey, we're growing so fast that 5% of our revenue meant that this thing that was supposed to get paid back in 6 months is now paid back in 4. Well, actually, now you've paid even higher an interest rate. You're kind of approaching that like 30% number. So that's really not been great for e-commerce merchants across the board. It's made things challenging because you're sort of presented these options that are, okay, it's this amount. They can't actually talk about interest rate percentages, which is what you would want to sit down with your accountant, your CFO, your controller, whatever sort of financial controls you have in your business. Maybe it's even just you as the founder. And you're looking at all these things, trying to figure out like, okay, what's my cost of capital? What's my cost of running this business? And it's very difficult to calculate because you now have another variable, which is, okay, if sales grow, actually my repayment schedule completely changes. So what's been really encouraging for me as just a bit of like a marketing and finance nerd playing in the e-commerce space has been to see now banks getting more and more comfortable with e-commerce businesses, which traditionally they weren't, right? It's a relatively liquid asset light business. It's not traditionally what your Main Street banks are looking for. But now banks are beginning in the very beginning stages of getting more comfortable with the e-commerce business model. And they're beginning to be able to offer normal lines of credit to e-commerce businesses, which means you can go to some of these folks and get $100,000 at a fixed 12%. And the nice thing is, if your sales grow, if your sales decrease, whatever happens in your business, you are paying 12% interest. You can choose to repay all of it. It's probably not necessarily, maybe a term loan. It might not be a term loan. Difference obviously being, do you have to pay it back in 1 year? Is it just, can you permanently roll over this loan? That would be like term versus non-term. You can really understand the flexibility on your capital a lot better, which lets you make more educated decisions about what you're going to do to grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about some pitfalls that people could run into, Amazon sellers, when they're looking at different options for financing. And you did mention a positive one being that some of the banks are starting to change. What other positive or, options can Amazon sellers look at that are beneficial to them, that aren't some of these pitfalls that you just mentioned?
Yeah, the other one that I've been seeing that I really like is we're beginning to now see some companies, banks, I believe Flexport does do this as well. I'd have to double check that it's not still a merchant cash advance situation, but there are some freight forwarders, tech companies, banks that are offering actually like inventory financing. So outside of a straight traditional bank line of credit, there are some folks who are going to look at, hey, you're bringing in this value of a purchase order. We're going to get comfortable financing X% of this purchase order over this particular term, over a 6-month term, over whatever. So it's predictable financing. You're going to see the traditional, they're new, but traditional merchant cash advance companies are going out and they're doing these variable sort of rates. And you've got the banks that are now beginning to offer these more traditional lines of credit, but they're looking at your revenue. So they're primarily, when you everyone's kind of gone through this funnel, I'm sure, at this point, where you go into someone saying you plug in all your numbers, maybe you provide some personal information, then they do a personal credit check. Most of the merchant cash advances don't. They're just looking at your revenue, which is why they have to charge such an incredibly high interest rate. Yeah, they're looking at revenue as sort of the leading metric. If they have access to true gross margin profitability data, they're looking at that as well. Whereas the inventory financing options are traditionally going to just look at, okay, like, what's your purchasing history been? Like, we're going to use that as a heuristic for business health. If you've continued to purchase inventory, we presume that you're selling this inventory at a rate that's enough to move through it so that you can afford this financing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when people are talking about getting ready to look at financing options, what kind of things can they do to kind of prep for that, either with their financials or getting paperwork together? Like, what kind of things do you recommend prior to them getting ready to go out and look for financing? Or should they step out and just sign up for a few of the good ones and then get the paperwork together that's needed? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So if you're going into a traditional bank setting, and saying, look, just the same way that the person in line behind you could own a construction company, that's just you're lined up at the bank to try to get a line of credit. You're definitely going to want at least notice to reader level financials. So certainly an up-to-date balance sheet, up-to-date cash flow statement, up-to-date P&L. Those are going to be like table stakes. You absolutely need to have that. For merchant cash advance companies, which again, those are the ones I'm not necessarily recommending, but they are a necessary evil for many people. Those are, you're likely just going to plug in your Shopify store, your Amazon store, potentially your QuickBooks. Some of them look at that as well. Or your ERP. And then there are other, when you're now hearing about these banks that are offering more traditional lines of credit, you should likely expect to plug in your stores. Again, for folks listening to this, more than likely an Amazon store. And you should also be prepared to put in your phone number, which they'll likely use to pull a soft credit check. So it doesn't affect your personal credit, but it does just check to make sure it's sort of tying, hey, how's your business health doing? But we are making a small business traditional line of credit loan, so we are just going to have to see kind of the business owner's holistic credit profile. In exchange for kind of that, you're going to be getting much more trustworthy, traditional, reliable, transparent capital than you might be getting from a merchant cash advance situation. Yeah.
And is there any differences in strategy for, let's say, somebody who's a bit on the newer side selling versus a well-established business when they're looking for financing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember in the early days of launching the first business that I did, it's so tempting when you get these big influxes of order. I mean, sometimes I launched with a Kickstarter campaign. So you sort of have this like enormous first month of orders. But the challenging thing is it's so difficult to predict and project inventory when you get this large influx in 1 month. Of orders. It's sort of the same thing if someone's an Amazon seller and they get like a really wonderful press hit. If there's an influencer or content creator that posts their product that is just absolutely crushing it. It is very tempting when you have a sudden, very positive event that potentially puts you out of stock or at risk of going out of stock. It's in every founder's DNA to immediately be like, okay, problem solving. The problem solving is I need to have more inventory. I need to go get lots of inventory. And there are actually a tremendous number of examples of brands that have made that sort of mistake and gone and taken on financing either in the form of debt, or they go and get equity capital, like venture capital or private equity partners, and sales slow down. It's not that they weren't wrong to get excited about the sort of situation, but if you begin capitalizing your business based on fairly short-term results, that can begin getting challenging because now you've sort of taken on this capital burden. But it was more of this blip in the sand, more than this actually ongoing sort of sales environment. So that's why it's always important to kind of consider seasonality when you're growing your business. So I would say that the largest mistake I've seen people make is take on a lot of financing in order to purchase inventory based on a very sudden shift in what appears to be kind of demand, go forward demand. And maybe as a bit more of a conservative bootstrapper sort of business builder myself, I'm a lot more a fan of, look, if something sells out, that's okay. Like there's so many different mechanics you can do to collect kind of like pre-sale signups to point people to different SKUs temporarily. Don't let yourself get totally rushed into taking on all this financing just so you can purchase inventory if you don't really have very firm evidence that this is a new reality and not a temporary hallucination based on a wonderful event for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back from this break, I want to talk to Gareth a little more about once you do get qualified and get that funding, what should you be putting it towards, and maybe what you shouldn't be putting it towards to help grow your business right after this commercial break.
Today's episode is brought to you by GETIDA, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics.
All right. If you've been listening to the show for any time, you all know, go over to GETIDA.com/Sellernomics, get that $400 in free FBA reimbursements. I have Gareth Everard of Gallup Growth on, and we're talking about grow your Amazon business with smart financing strategies. He was just starting to give us some information on different ways to use that money to basically grow your business. I'd like to continue with that, Gareth, and let's give some more information that, they qualified to get this money. They have this money available. I'm gonna do this a little bit as a two-parter. Sometimes, let's say it's $100,000 is what they are, have credit up to or available to them. Should they be taking that full amount out, or should they just take it as needed? And the second part of that is, where should they be putting that money to grow their business? Go ahead.
Oh, that's a spicy question
Yes.
in a roundabout sort of way, because you're asking me, when you get qualified for an amount of money, do you take out the full amount of money? I would say firm no. Effectively, the nice thing about a line of credit is it buys something that as business owners, it can be very challenging to purchase, which is optionality. So once you qualify for a line of credit, that doesn't mean take out the entire line of credit. It means that you now have that available to you when you need it. If someone offered you $200,000 at some particular interest rate, you want to be extremely tactical about, hey, what am I going to be doing with this to make a return on investment that will justify now if you took out all 200,000 at like a 15% interest rate, and you're not talking about you have to be able to finance $30,000 a year of fresh expenses, assuming that you're not paying back any of the principal over the term of that loan. So that's a fairly meaningful consideration. So I wouldn't necessarily advocate for taking it all out. I do, as again, as a business owner, like to have that available to me. I like to know that there are lines of credit if big opportunities come up. If you get this incredible clearance marketing advertising spot that it's such an incredible fit for your business, you can't say no. You wouldn't typically have that cash on hand. If you've got that line of credit, great. If you've got kind of a big wholesale order that comes in at the last minute, or some wholesale interest, like fairly high conviction interest that you can tack on, so for a larger order from your supplier, those are really great little kind of examples and opportunities. But I really like having that optionality, so you can tap it when you need it, but it's definitely not a free money machine. As soon as you tap that money, the clock starts on the interest payments. So you want to be really tactical about it. Beyond that, you were asking me what are good ways to spend the money. I'm a big believer in what I call like desired outcome framework thinking when I'm going about my business. So what I mean by that is, for me, I'm first and foremost a bootstrapper, which means there's a target net profit percent that I want out of each business. I'm not really in the business of like raising money from venture capitalists to drive higher and higher valuations and hopefully like exit in secondaries or make money at the exit. I think that's great. I know lots of people who've done very well for themselves, but I think especially on the Amazon business side, it really lends itself a lot more to like make a good business that makes net profit, that cash flows as well as you can make a cash flow. So for me, when I'm looking at like, hey, what am I going to be, how am I thinking about this financing solution? I want to target that net profit percent. And let's say that that's 20%. You actually, every $100,000 that comes in, you want to make sure that $20,000 is going into your pocket or your LLC or whatever, however you think about it. So then you're going to look at, okay, if $100,000 is 100% of revenue and your target net profit, money into your pocket, is 20%. Let's pretend that your COGS is 40%. And that you happen to know that at the current run rate that you're at, your other overhead is 7% of your revenue. So now we're actually going to know you've got that 100% of revenue, $100,000 minus 40%, $40,000 for just all COGS. I mean, like landed COGS, everything that it takes to get the product to the customer, minus your 7% for overhead. You're basically left at 33% for like marketing and marketing agency and all marketing sort of other related spend. I'm obviously massively oversimplifying here into like just a couple of categories. P&L statements are a lot more complicated than this, but really what I'm trying to get to is you want to be clear on like, these are the levels, and leave that net profit target. That's almost the determinant of what you can afford to spend on marketing. And if you can get clear on that, so for this silly example I'm giving here, around like $33,000, 33% is your kind of allowable marketing spend for this $100,000 of revenue. You're going to want to look at that and say, okay, if I know that that's how this business is going to work, I want to actually be able to try to take a shot at a 3 times media efficiency ratio, run my advertising, and if I need to use financing to finance that, at least I can look at my numbers and say, okay, I know that if I'm making 3 or better in my media efficiency ratio, maybe tack on a little bit of extra fudge room, so to speak. If you're also going to be paying interest, you can do all this in a spreadsheet fairly easily. You're going to want to look at all that and say, okay, great. If I'm seeing 3 or better, I should be trying to scale this sort of advertising. And I know I should be pulling it back if I'm seeing less than 3. So just by starting with the desired outcome of like, I want this level of profitability, it'll become fairly clear to you, like, where are the holes from a cash flow perspective if I want to be spending on marketing and I don't have the money for that, but I know this metric. I just need to hit this 3 times media efficiency ratio, or 3 times blended ROAS is another way to say that. Or I need to purchase inventory because I want to buy inventory to bring my gross margin back to a better ratio. Those are all really tangible sort of ways to leverage financing. And then you're just adding an extra line item. Again, we broke it down into ridiculously simple, like probably oversimplified, but you've got your revenue minus kind of all the COGS, minus overhead, minus marketing spend, minus interest, roughly equals that net profit target. So if you're kind of accounting for all of those things, you can be really diligent and tactical about growing your business. But from the perspective of like, it is very important that this percent of the money ultimately comes into my pocket. That's what's paying for my life or what have you. So if you're doing all that together, I find that to be a really effective way to get very clear on your numbers and not take on too much capital, or also be like, oh, am I spending the right amount on marketing? No, you actually reverse engineer out the marketing percent from your desired profitability outcomes, and then decide if financing is going to be the appropriate thing to get there.
Yeah. What about also if somebody's looking to sell, let's say an Amazon seller is looking to sell their business in the next 6 months, should they be taking on financing or debt at that point? And if yes, or even no, obviously with the yes side, if they are, why would they take that on? What are they looking to do with it to maybe help grow that company in the next 6 months to make it better? Or what's your opinion on that?
Oh, that's a great question too, as well. So look, at the end of the day, there's a recent period of exceptionally enthusiastic acquisitions of Amazon and FBA businesses, I would say. I think that market has cooled a little bit. So I know that there was a period of time where there was really just enthusiasm to look at trailing 12-month financials, which is bizarre. Typically, acquirers are going to be wanting to look at like 3 years of history to kind of understand where the business has come from and do maybe like a discounted cash flow analysis to ultimately value the business. But yeah, there was recently 2020 to kind of maybe early 2022, there's a fairly enthusiastic period of valuing things at like trailing 12 months EBITDA. And during that time, I would say if there's an opportunity to finance something and show, if you know that you're selling in 6 to 12 months, yeah, if you can bring on debt and you know that that's going to grow things relatively quickly, you're going to be able to temporarily boost your EBITDA number and kind of then have this obviously like a debt level that you're going to ultimately have to pay back. I think it's then important to sort of do a calculation based on the industry that you're in, based on the acquisition climate that you're in at any given point. You really want to figure out, hey, how confident am I that the debt that I'm taking on will grow EBITDA at a fast enough rate? Because like your business, no matter what, whether it's the 2020 to 2022 or kind of a more normal acquisition time, your business is almost certainly going to get valued on a EBITDA multiple. So if you're thinking to yourself, great, I can take on this debt and that will grow my payout on an EBITDA basis. If I think that my industry multiple is like 10 times EBITDA and I'm taking on $200,000 of debt, you want to be fairly certain that you're going to be adding more than a little bit more than $20,000 a month, right? To really be very confident in taking on that debt, $20,000 a month of EBITDA, so that ultimately, like I guess another way to put it is you're going to be left with that debt after you sell. It's going to be an asset sale, which means the acquirer is taking the assets from your business, but they're not taking on the liabilities as well. That's typically not done. So you just want to make sure that you're upping the EBITDA that you're going to get paid out on. So if you were able to increase your EBITDA by $20,000 by taking on $200,000 of debt, that was going to get recognized across a whole 12-month period at a trailing 12 months. You've just added $240,000 within this, this silly example, to the value. So you're going to be getting back $240,000 for taking on $200,000 of debt, but that's not necessarily a guarantee. So I think it's good to always run the numbers, and the higher the multiple in your industry and the faster that your business is already growing and the better you feel about your business, frankly, it means that financing is going to make more and more sense. If this is sort of like a fire sale type situation that you're sort of considering in the next 6 months, probably don't take on financing.
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to get kind of a wrap up from Gareth. Anything we missed as far as tips and advice on growing your Amazon business with smart financing strategies. And then, of course, we want to know more about Gareth himself and Gallup Growth right after this commercial break.
Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at GETIDA.com/Sellernomics.
You all know where to go. GETIDA.com/Sellernomics. I'm here with Gareth Everard of Gallup Growth, and we're talking about grow your Amazon business with smart financing strategies. Gareth, give us anything we missed on tips or strategies to help these Amazon sellers, with smart financing strategies that we may have missed. And then let's also want to hear more about yourself and Gallup Growth.
For sure. Well, I mean, I can probably sort of combine those answers a little bit. So one thing that I'd advise anyone who's sort of considering this like next step of growth and financing is honestly the reason that we created Gallup Growth at the end of the day is I was talking a lot about those banks that are now offering more traditional lines of credit to e-commerce businesses. The catch with that is that they're kind of hard to find. They're not necessarily, there's no like big banner outside, your local bank saying, hey, we now understand how to read e-commerce P&Ls and balance sheets, and now we offer financing for them. That's never going to happen. But Gallup was founded by a bunch of e-commerce merchants, fintech people, and folks who used to actually work at some of those merchant cash advance places and saw the shortcomings of that. And the idea was sort of, hey, can we pair up banks, these more niche banks that are eager to finance e-commerce merchants with traditional, totally normal, transparent, easy to understand lines of credit. But they don't know where to find the e-commerce merchants, and the e-commerce merchants have never heard of these banks. They're all big banks, but they're just, they're not necessarily on Main Street in your town or city. So Gallup is just a place you can go and get paired up with offers based on the size of your business. And yeah, so it comes out a lot cheaper than almost all, if not all, merchant cash advances. So I would recommend looking that up. I'm excited to be a part of it because mostly just as primarily an e-commerce seller myself, both on Amazon and Shopify for 10 years now. I was just really frustrated with going to a bank and they wouldn't understand. And then once I'm kind of understanding the implied interest rates of merchant cash advances, I was like, that's almost offensive. So I'm just excited that something like this is finally existing. Yeah, I think you wanted to hear a bit more about me. I mean, my first company I started is called Rockwell Razors. I started it when I was still in college, actually, almost 10 years ago. Yeah, we sell like old timey kind of traditional safety razors with a bit of a twist so that you can. I re-engineered it so that it's a lot easier to shave. You don't cut yourself with a safety razor, and you don't have to have those expensive plastic cartridges anymore. So that's on Shopify, Amazon, sell wholesale internationally. I've started a bunch of other businesses along the way, including anything from a solid cologne business, which is like cologne in a wax format, all the way through to a electric composting machine that overnight turns your food waste into dirt, and that's called Lomi. I'm involved in an air purifier called Jasper that's sort of like industrial strength air purifier, but for your home. So that's been really interesting. I also started a company called Keto, which is like a ketogenic diet breathalyzer. So I've been all over the place, just love being in the e-commerce space. I love meeting everyone in the e-commerce space, folks like yourself. So yeah, again, thank you for having me on this. And just hopefully a little bit of a resource for anybody thinking about, hey, I want to grow my business using debt or any sort of other form of finance, just understanding that there are becoming more and more new options available that very much were not available to e-commerce merchants even 12, 24 months ago.
Yeah, and let us know how long ago was it you came over to Gallup Growth, and then let everybody know the website and email to reach out to. For those that are listening, I'll put it up on the screen for everybody who's watching us on YouTube, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, Shane, Brian, and myself kind of all been jamming on Gallup since the beginning of Gallup, which was since last year. And yeah, you can just go to gallupgrowth.com. And it's super quick if you're curious and you want to check out if your business is bankable in the eyes of these sort of new e-commerce contextualized banks. It'll take about 2 minutes to find that out just on gallupgrowth.com. Or you can email me. I'm Gareth@gallupgrowth.com. And I'm happy to give any advice or feedback or what have you. I'm an e-commerce merchant first, so come to me with any questions you might have. I just love to jam on that stuff all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. So those that are listening, let me spell that for you. It's GALLOPGROWTH.com, gallupgrowth.com, and it's Gareth, GARETH at gallupgrowth.com. If you want to email Gareth and have any questions, of course, you could always go to the website, fill out any information there, or hit them through their contact form, that whole great thing. Absolutely great having you on, Gareth. We really appreciate it. And it's a lot of great information for people to sift through, and hopefully they go back, re-listen, and if they have any questions, like I said, please reach out to Gareth. I'm sure he'd be happy to help you guys out with any questions you have, or if you're looking at getting any financing or what financing options are available out there. So once again, that's Gareth Everard at gallupgrowth.com. It's Gareth at gallupgrowth.com. But the website is obviously gallupgrowth.com. Gareth, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for everybody listening. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Sellernomics podcast. Special thanks to our sponsor, GETIDA. Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at getida.com/Sellernomics. Be sure to join us again next week for more great tips on how to grow your business. And thanks again for listening.